Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Paul Holdengraber, and I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the New York Public Library, known as Live from the New York Public Library. My goal here at the library is simply, as you've heard me say so many times, to make the lions roar, to make a heavy institution dance, and if possible, to make it levitate. After the conversation, George Saunders will sign books, and I want to thank again and again and again our independent bookseller, 192 Books. I would also like to thank, as always, Barbara Fillen from Random House. Barbara, thank you so much. You have in front of you the program of the spring season. There are a few additions. For instance, next Wednesday, on March the 6th, I will be interviewing the artist Ed Ruscha, and on May 21st, Matthew Barney. Also, Andrea Simon will be joined by Nicole Krauss on April 22nd, and to discuss his new novel, Odds Against Tomorrow, in an evening entitled Worst Case Scenarios, Nathaniel Rich will be joined by the one and only Slavoj Žižek. So, and other additions will be added. I'm just insatiable. To find out more, I suggest that you join our email list, and why not become a friend of the New York Public Library. Months ago, when thanks to Barbara Fillen, I had the good fortune of inviting George Saunders, I asked him a simple question. Who would be your most desired interviewer? He mentioned a few names I should add, of very famous writers and excellent journalists. He wrote, maybe we can start with those names. Do you have any ideas that I'm missing here? And then this line, listen carefully. My childhood dream was to be interviewed by Dick Cavett. And then he adds, and I have some qualms about that, or interview him. Ha! In 1899, in a letter to Fliess, Freud wrote, I gave myself a present, Schliemann's Ilios, and greatly enjoyed the account of his childhood. The man was happy when he found Priam's treasure, because happiness comes only from the fulfillment of a childhood wish. A week after George Saunders expressed his childhood dream to me, I was to write to him that his childhood dream had become true. In response to this news, Saunders wrote, and I hope he won't mind my reading this out loud to you. I'm not sure I know you well enough to say this. We didn't know each other at all. He didn't write that. I'm not sure I know you well enough to say this, but holy shit. Dream come true indeed. In a story that ran this past Sunday in the New York Post, Saunders confirmed that indeed Dick Cavett is his childhood hero, and he added, I learned how to be a person from him. Over the past 6 or 7 years, I've asked my guests to provide me with 7 words that will define them. A haiku of sorts, or if you want to be very modern, a tweet. George Saunders wrote the following: why so hard to get smarter and nicer? Dick Cavett wrote Nebraska, magic, Yale, television, Broadway, movies, writing. And one last matter to settle, George Saunders, before I invite you to the Live from the New York Public Library stage with Dick Cavett. Your childhood dream may have been to be interviewed by Dick Cavett, and so you will. Dream granted, fulfilled. You added, or interview him. Now, we may have to fight over that, George. Because as an interviewer, or as I prefer to call myself, an instigator, I may have to interview Dick Cavett myself. To be continued, George. As you added after your or interview him, ha. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome warmly to this stage George Saunders and his childhood hero, Dick Cavett.
Thank you. Well, I have to tell you something that we've been around each other for about an hour now, and I have not mentioned this. I guess I don't read emails all that well, and I really, honest to God, thought you were going to do me tonight.
Oh, I'm afraid of that.
I said, so go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, one other thing. People kept saying to me, you do know who George Saunders is, and of course I did and do, and I don't believe in fulsome compliments, but you were just great in All About Eve. I'm sorry for the young people who don't get the reference, but Google it. We don't have time for you. Not bad.
Good.
So, at the last minute or hour, I realized maybe I am the interlocutor, the host, the Jack Parr, the Johnny Carson.
The Dick Cavett.
Or the Dick Cavett, yeah. Or David Frost, or the Boar. Peter Cook, the greatest comedian of my lifetime next to Groucho, just before he died, was asked by the BBC, Peter, do you regret anything? And he said, yes, I do, in fact. I once saved David Frost from drowning. What that has to do with my new friend here, I don't know. I had my parents were English teachers, and their friends were teachers, or one was a postal clerk but had read everything anyone had ever read. And he used to say, my sister teaches writing in Washington University. And he always put teaches in quotes, teaches writing. Was it taught to you in any way?
It was. I was a grad student with Tobias Wolff in Syracuse. And I think by that time I was pretty good, but what you learned there was the discipline, that there were other people doing it. It wasn't just you in Amarillo, Texas. And so that was good to see that, you go to a party and everyone would leave early and be home writing. And I think also with Wolff, there was, what you learned was that the writing was something that was happening apart from everything else. He wasn't a wild, crazy guy. He wasn't outwardly rebellious. He didn't talk a lot of crap about writing or art. He just was a real well-read, gentle guy. So you knew that all that magic he was making was taking place 4 hours in the morning in his house, and it had nothing to do with anything going on outside. So that was kind of a nice, I think as a young person, I held out the hope that you could do it by being flamboyant or traveling a lot or having something really freaky happen to you, only you, and then you could write about it. But then you saw that he just vanished in the morning and did something intense, and then these beautiful stories came out. So, yeah.
Were you ever taught such things as the mechanical art of plotting?
No.
Or some of the old-fashioned ways they used to allegedly teach writing, and how to devise a climax for your story?
No. I got a lot of just, the nuts and bolts from the nuns in Chicago, and that was really useful. The guilt, extreme guilt, that was a good trail for writers. It's never good enough.
Don't anyone be embarrassed that I can't find my glasses and therefore can't see my notes. Dick Van Dyke always said, I only need them for the phone book and for finding it. Here's a name that some folks here, I gather, are closer to my age than, say, Margaret O'Brien's when she was making movies. Clifton Fadiman. Does that mean anything to you? Clifton Fadiman.
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah. He, he hosted the radio show that my father would let anybody talk during in the old days called Information Please. And all the literary greats appeared on that show, and others. It'd be hard to do it today, perhaps. But I'm sure why I brought him up. Oh, yeah. I just read, I found a copy, I got it for 50 cents, of his essays. And one of the best ones is about reading as a kid. One assumes you read as a kid, though not everybody does. Yeah. Can you recall, I don't think I've ever asked anybody this, can you recall learning to read at all?
Yes.
You can.
I can.
I haven't a scintilla of memory of learning to read.
I remember the first, again, with always it's a nun, but the first time that a sentence popped off and became a meaning, that was I can remember that. But I was taught to read in a deeper way by reading that book Esther Forbes, or Johnny Tremain by Esther Forbes, and that was given to me by a nun in 3rd grade, and it was a nun that I was a little bit in love with. She was one of those hot nuns, but she said to me, she pulled me aside, which was, that's pretty good, and she said I have something that I think that you'll like, and then she handed over this edition of Johnny Tremain with the Caldecott Prize, a big gold sticker.
Caldecott, right. They had an award.
That's right, and it was a beautiful gold sticker. And she said, "I don't know. I think you can handle this," which was like catnip. So I took it home, and that book was the first time I'd ever seen style. It was you could see she'd made some very strange decisions, comma omissions, and strange compound words, and that really kind of nailed me. I'd never seen that done before, and so I remember going out into we had, for some reason, our playground was a parking lot in Chicago. There was nothing on it but just lines. And but I remember going out and thinking in that Esther Forbes diction, looking in, trying to describe the nuns, 3 black shapes looking stern, with no comma, that kind of. So the language had kind of gotten into my head in a way that had never happened before.
But can you actually remember learning, oh yes, A followed by N is what again? And
I don't think I remember that, no. Maybe.
I apparently, by the way, when I do an event like this, I'm always criticized for talking about myself, so just shut me up. But
no.
I have no memory of that, and I'm told that I read at 2.5. Wow. Picked up a book called Max and Moritz, a comic German book, in English in this case. I wasn't that smart. So I have no memory. But here's a terrible confession, and if you'll promise to make an embarrassing confession about yourself, okay, I'll tell you this. I was reminded by an old teacher that they all seemed that when you were a kid, that in 2nd grade, when the other kids read, as you read around the room, badly, I held my ears. Isn't that awful? And that was the beginning of the report cards that said Dick must learn to be more considerate of others. With others was
if in the middle of this you put your hands up, I'll take the hint. I'll get the
well, okay. I doubt that I'll have to do that. But what about the standard Rover boys of the old days and stuff? Were those still read when you were a kid?
No, it was Tom Swift. Tom Swift was read.
Tom Swift,
and there were a series of books called Great Something of World War II, so great fighter pilots, great rescues of, great invasions, and they were really just like duck poop. They just go right through you, very light. But I wanted to see how it all turned out. And
yeah, how it turned out, that was the key thing.
And it was always the same. We always won, but it was just that kind of...
It's funny, the odds never tipped, did they? What about what's often mistaken as a children's book, Tom Sawyer?
I never read it until maybe college. I didn't find those kind of books, and I didn't have a lot of the kind of standard kids books that you would read to your kids. But I do remember in 6th grade reading The Exorcist, which was
6th grade.
Yeah. Oh my father had gone to the movie, and this is incredible. But you can't see it. So I thought, well, I'll read the damn book. So I got The Exorcist and read it late. I mean, I read the whole thing in a day and finished at about 4 a.m, just trembling with fear. And my father and my uncle, apparently they knew that I had done that. So the next morning I woke up flying upwards out of, you remember that scene where she's flying up out of her bed, and I'm hearing these snarling noises, and I'm thinking, now I did it to myself, I shouldn't have read that. And my father and my uncle were down at the end of the bed. Does that count as the embarrassing revelation? Is that?
That'll be a good scene in the movie of your life.
Yeah.
Oh God, another awful confession. I interviewed for Jack Parr, before he made me writer, guests, and I interviewed a man named Peter Blatty. And my report was, this guy has written a book he thinks is going to be great. It was The Exorcist, of course.
Yeah. Oh, ouch.
Oh Lord, I hope he doesn't ever. He's not. If he's here tonight, I'm very,
sorry.
Very sorry about that. So, as time went by, did you graduate to the Faulkners and the? There's only one Faulkner. No. Why did we say that?
There's Jodie Faulkner, but not.
She could really get the words down on paper.
Yeah.
I love. I shall allow you to answer that, but I'll forget if I don't say this. He was asked once, and I hope this isn't mythical, by a high school interviewer girl with a clipboard who would pronounce interesting from the Midwest. It's interesting, Mr. Faulkner, that you made this remark that you would kill your grandmother to get a good jolt into your writing if you needed to. Can you guess his answer? Does anyone know? He said, oh, hell yes. A good short story is worth any number of old ladies. That would have appealed to W.C. Fields and a few others. What question are you tired of? Have you had to do the book tour thing frequently?
Yeah,
and
right
usually
in the middle of it.
One of them is, why did you write this book?
Yeah. Well, I got it one time at a college, and the young woman asked it a little differently. She said, why did you write this book? Which is a slightly, a nice variation.
Stress is everything in a sentence, yeah. And what else are they? People ask you what's your very favorite something, as if you could, for example, say which movie is the best of the year.
Yeah.
Who's been your most interesting guest is one I get.
Who was your most interesting guest?
Now that I did not hear. That idea that a book or a guest wins, there's a top place and then 2, 3, 4, 5 falling down from that. It just seems absurd to me.
Well, and it runs against the truth, which is that many things come together, and they kind of, maybe 6 or 7 get in your head, and the question of best isn't there. It's just that they were there at the right time. And even sometimes, one of my big influences was Ayn Rand, the Atlas Shrugged.
Do you say Ayn Rand?
I say, or Ayn, or you can also say Rand.
I say Ayn Rand. I'm really affected, yeah.
But that's a terrible book. But it came along. That's just my opinion. Yeah. But it came along when I was in high school and just trying to figure out what I was doing. And at that time, I played the guitar, and I had a friend who had a friend who had a friend who knew somebody in the Eagles, the band. And we thought, that would probably work. We could do that, And so we were going to try to somehow get on tour with them. And just at that, But just at that time, somebody gave me Atlas Shrugged, and I hadn't read a novel probably since Johnny Tremaine, a real.
Atlas
and I
Shrugged.
read it, and it just, it was very moving. It wasn't moving, but it was just it was people and places and words, and at one point I had this very strong sense of that there were such things as intellectual communities, and I thought Ayn Rand might have been in one somewhere, and it struck me that I had this vision of myself in a college sweater, walking with some friends, discussing the ideas of Ayn Rand,
Well, when you're at a young age, her novels with all that power, it's very appealing, and then later you find out what a crock of shit she was.
Yes, yeah.
But are we on? From somewhere, she just knocked my notes on the floor.
Yeah, she,
I tell you what, she. I had her booked on my PBS show, and she sent a form along, not a release form, but 15 stipulations. Can you guess what the last one was?
no.
Besides Mr. Cavett not being here. The last one was, there will not be disagreement with Miss Rand's ideas.
Ew. Oh, yes, there will.
And I no. Well, it didn't happen because I wrote back, nor will there be Miss Rand. And so I'm kind of sorry, because I think it would have been fun to get the old bag out there. And,
But I'll tell you one thing. You know, I didn't read between Esther Forbes and Ayn Rand, but and this is just to come right out and kiss up, because I did watch your show obsessively, and that was an incredibly wonderful life. This is on the south side of Chicago, and my parents had given me a television for my room, and I was allowed to watch it as late as I wanted. So every night I'd watch your show, and got so many wonderful, beautiful lessons about generosity from you, curiosity, intensity, and about the fact that there were people out there who were doing intellectual work, and there was somebody championing them. So I'm sure I'm not alone in wanting to thank you for that. It was an incredible thing.
well, can I hear that again?
Yeah.
I feel swell now.
No, actually, I'll tell you what, I remember watching the famous Lester Maddox episode. And it was late, and it seemed like it was late in the show, and I jumped out of bed and ran down the hall to try to find somebody that I couldn't believe that could happen.
Verify
that was
going
fantastic.
on. Yeah, that was something. And I saw that thing recently, and I was on the edge of my chair watching it. It builds like a drama.
Did you ever speak to him after that? Was there ever any?
Yeah, once by phone.
By phone.
After the show, he got 6,000 telegrams congratulating him, and I got 6,000 suggesting I try swimming in the Yazoo River with an anchor around my neck. And that might have been the one that produced my favorite hate mail from Waco, Texas. You might have guessed that. Dear Dick Cavett, you little sawed-off faggot communist shrimp. And I wrote, it had a return address. Honest to God, and I was able to write back, I am not sawed off. I wonder if they got it. But this part about you learning to be a person, you said you learned from me. What were you before?
No, I don't know. That was no. I mean, there was some kind of my feeling would be there's something kind of nascent in all of us that wants to be generous and engaged and involved. And you see one example of that on the large stage, the screen, and it opens something up in you. I remember after 9/11. Remember, there's that period where everybody. Well, not everybody, but some people were saying if you said anything that was even slightly anti-administration, it was unpatriotic. And you sort of felt like, well, maybe I hate to be the one who says the thing that lets the terrorist win, you know. And in the same week, Al Gore and Tom Daschle both said, bullshit. It's not true. And there was such a feeling of seeing your better self kind of writ large. And I got that feeling all the time from your show, because you didn't take any shit from anybody, but also you were incredibly generous, and you gave people a chance to recover, you gave people a chance to do their best. And I think even as a kid, I just saw that as a really incredibly positive set of traits.
Then I can't help asking, did you think I was a little hard on Norman Mailer with my...
No. I just watched that the other night, and that...
Let's establish now the ultimate line in that, because it's always misquoted. When he said something about threatening the three of us, and somehow I wouldn't hit anybody here because they're all smaller than I am. I had said, I hope we get through the show without you hitting anybody. And I said, in what ways smaller? He said, intellectually smaller. And that was what produced, perhaps you'd like another chair to help contain your giant intellect.
That's right.
Which got an inordinate laugh then, but not now. And then that finally got to read the next question off the question sheet, which to me meant David Frost, and that produced, and this is the correct wording, why don't you fold it 5 ways and put it where the moon don't shine? Now, it's often quoted, and this is tin ear writing, and why don't you stick it where the sun doesn't shine?
Not as good.
And it loses it all, because that would be vulgar.
Yeah.
Stick it doesn't work. Okay, here's a question for you. What is the funniest essay ever written, and is at the same time a master course in writing?
I think that there's one, and I'll get the title wrong, but it's by Jack Handey, and it's something like How to Be an Artist.
Oh,
and it's
really?
just an unbelievably virtuosic sequence of descriptions of the paintings he's going to someday do, which are all crazier than the one before. And what's a masterclass in it is that in humor writing, I find it's really hard to do anything. You have to escalate. You have to escalate, but it's very difficult. And he does this escalation just with 15 paintings. There's no, the sort of setup doesn't shift. The essay doesn't go off in some other direction. He just says, I'm going to list these paintings, and he does it. And the escalation is in the sequence. I don't remember a single one of them, but I remember sitting there having to stop reading to get up and walk around so I could continue breathing, so I could go back and read. He's a really funny, brilliant stylist.
Yes. Yeah. So that would be your candidate.
I think so, yeah.
Do you want to know the correct answer?
Yes, I really would.
Sorry. Just reach over and slap me if you want to. The audience would enjoy it, I think. Yep. It's, here's the title, I'll only say it once. Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses.
Mark Twain.
By Mark Twain. And I read it every year, and it gets better every time. And it's just a masterpiece. And there's one full page, single-spaced of, this is what brought it up, Fenimore Cooper's genius for getting just the wrong word. Female for woman, this for thing, and this for that, this for that, this for that. And you might agree that the trick of writing an essay is how do I close it, like a comedy sketch.
Right.
And that one ends about illustrating Cooper's violated all the rules of writing. You can estimate this is that, is it gets the wrong word for this, the characters are not real, the logic flies into the air, that something doesn't follow, the people don't resemble anyone you've ever, and then he ends it with, but what is left is art. I think we must all admit that. Great essay.
That's the essay where he does this great analysis of how it would be impossible for the canoe. The canoe would have to be 3 miles long to pass under the tree in order to...
Cooper's Indians, yes, and the gigantic... If you are smart, you will go home now. And it is online, or was. I turned someone on to it. I must have, Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses. It's not in that he has a line that always gives me goose flesh about writing, and I know you know it.
Don't bet on it.
The difference between the almost right word and the right word is the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning. I just gave myself a chill. Did anyone else get one? People with a tin ear, including one fine comedy writer, always argue with me. Say, it's just as fun the other way around, lightning and the lightning bug. And I said, no, it's not.
No.
The last word, lightning, is majestic. Right. It's poetry. The other one's a gag. Yeah. Do you go back and change wording?
Oh, yeah. I'm a big reviser. I have one story in this new book I started in '98 and just finished it last spring. So it's kind of the inner nun theory, which is what are you trying to pull? That kind of idea, yeah. But I mean, I found too that so much of the in that revision process, if you're leaning into the language and trying to make it a little edgier, you tend to it becomes truer, becomes more detailed, more specific, and somehow more true. So, and I can't. The first time I do it, it tends to be a little caricaturish and a little bit harsh, sometimes a little cruel. But then after many, many passes, you start to see the different exit ramps where you've left maybe kindness or close observation and gone off on some kind of projective ledge. And then but with the successive revisions, you can pull it back. And over the course of these years, the piece actually moves, it becomes truer and maybe becomes, I don't know if kinder, but it becomes a little more honest in the things that it's pillorying or criticizing. And so for me, I wish I was somebody who could just do it right the first time, but for me it's about many, many revisions and say, oh, there's a little bit of bullshit, let's fix that. That's good enough for today. And then come back the next day. And over many, many weeks, it starts to kind of, like a big ship, it starts to move in a better direction.
Does it happen in any instance in something that you have published, and you think, how did I miss the...
Yeah, well, There are some times where I see a little bit of a cheap joke or a quick joke, where now I would go, oh, if I would just have stood by that one a little bit longer, I might have gotten something a little more, a little nicer. But and then also, I think with stories, by the time I'm done with them and send them to the New Yorker, usually I would fight for every comma. I'm sure of every comma. I'm sure of every coffee stain. Everything's perfect. And then even a few months later, it kind of, that conceit kind of falls apart, and then you read it out loud, and you're like, yeah, that's all right. It's good enough, but I don't know why that and not that. It's mysterious.
Is there anything you've ever decided not to publish at all?
There's nothing I decided not to publish.
Strangled. You got people who do that
I've got
for
people
you.
Yeah. No, when my wife and I were first married, I was working at a pharmaceutical company writing up animal reports. And so I think we both were kind of like, this, we didn't expect this. We wanted something better. So I went to a wedding in Mexico, a friend's wedding. It was very glamorous, great novelistic stuff. There was a radical priest that did the service, and there was a guy who just got out of prison. There was a male model / surfer in attendance, and this was really great. It was like Malcolm Lowry territory. So I came back and I said, honey, don't worry, I got this. We're going. So we had, I think, one of our daughters then. So I would stay up late, drink coffee, get up at 6 in the morning or 7, go to work. And finally, after, I don't know, maybe a year, I had this 700-page novel. And then I thought, no, I'm a minimalist. I'll cut it back. So I cut it back to 380 or something. And just to give you some idea of how good this book was, it was called La Boda de Eduardo, which I think means Ed's wedding. It's just, yeah. So then I gave it to my wife to read, and I thought, I think we really got something here. I think it's and so I said, it's long, so just take your time. I'll just check back in a week or so. And like any real writer, you go around the corner and peek back. And she maybe was on page 2, and she just had her head in her hands like this.
Oh, God.
And so that one, I didn't even send it out.
You married that woman?
Oh, yeah.
Before or after that incident?
Yeah, way before. She saved me. Yeah. So that one never even went out.
Who used the phrase "murder your darlings" about
I think
going
that was
over
Faulkner.
your own writing?
I think that was Faulkner.
Was it Faulkner?
Jodie Faulkner. Yeah.
I thought it was "murder your grandmother."
Yeah.
And who gets credit for saying one of the secrets of writing is to look back over it when you feel you've finished, read it through one last time, and any passages that strike you as particularly fine, strike out.
Yeah. I don't know who said it, but it's true.
Somebody said it.
Yeah.
Good.
Luckily, I never have those parts that seem fine.
Was it Joe A lot of good quotes about writing, and some of them are by people who can't write themselves, but they can come up. By the way, if you do a talk show and we find ourselves reversed, and you finally own up to the fact that you were supposed to interview me tonight, here's a warning that I found the hard way. My friend Chris Porterfield finally pointed out to me that it's about time we admitted to ourselves that some of the very finest writers who write the most mellifluous prose can't talk. And it's such a... You're too modest. It's such a shock when it happens. You think, I mean, it's as if John Cheever came in and said, "Oh, yeah, right," which he didn't. You know.
I read some.
Did you ever see a show I did with Cheever and Updike?
I didn't see that one.
I'll get it for you.
Okay, right.
And anyone else who wants it. I got to see it because I wrote a blog about that show and those two. But what was fun about it was watching John Updike glow when Cheever praised his writing. It was just the sweetest thing. And luckily the director cut to it in time.
I saw on YouTube there's an incredible clip of Hemingway talking to a reporter at the Finca-Vigia, and it's the strange... You can't... I still don't know quite what's going on because he's very stiff and he's welcoming you. And then it looks like he's being prompted by somebody. And then he goes, to
America?
To the Finkovija. Like that. And it's just,
God.
and then the broadcaster is equally strange in that kind of late 50s way. Well, Mr. Hemingway. It's like, so we've come a long way.
It never occurred to me that you could find or Google or whatever Hemingway talking.
You can actually find Tolstoy, not a video, but he records portions of What is Art or something in French, German, and English. And you can hear Leo in English.
You can hear Tennyson reading The Charge of the Light Brigade on the British Museum recording.
And he always uses, it's weird because Tennyson uses the word dude a lot, which you wouldn't think that.
Dude?
Dude, yeah.
Well, that is interesting, boys and girls. Let's all make a note of that. Was there a Lord Balfour in England history? The great Peter Ustinov said he heard a recording of Lord Balfour making his first recording ever. And it ended something like, and thus we go forth into the widening vista of history and on to triumph. Was that all right? You can hear it. You know, Twain was recorded by Edison, and it burned up in a fire Edison had. We could have heard Once and for All if Hal Holbrook was right. Hey, should we lighten the atmosphere a little bit and talk about death?
Yeah, I think we should.
Because you've written and been quoted eloquently, and I'm not sure I can cite the places, but how many identify, how's it go? I work all day and get half drunk at night, waking to soundless dark I stare. Soon the window edges will grow light, and then I see what's really always there, unresting death, the whole day nearer now.
I know, I get that.
Phil Larkin. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
It's a great poem. It's his masterpiece, I think is generally agreed. It has a line in it about the things that don't make death, try to make death seem palatable or ease from the fear. And he says, I hope I get it right, religion tried that vast moth-eaten musical brocade created to pretend we never die. It got to somebody.
Yeah.
It's the poem Aubade, A-U-B-A-D-E. It is online. Aubade is a prayer to the morning, or a poem written to the morning. Beautiful. Fabulous poem. But you, about death, are you against it?
I haven't really thought it out beyond me, but I'm against it for me, for sure. Yeah, no.
That poem has the fear that when and how and where myself shall die. But where did I read you on the subject of death and saying that it made you think of wasting time when the clock is ticking, but you put it better.
Yeah, no, well, I think, yeah. What is that, Woody Allen? I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens.
That was Groucho Marx's favorite Woody Allen line. Yeah, I don't want to be around.
No, I've had a couple things in my life where it was here, and I thought, boy, that 2 or 3 days after that are really strange turf. When you've had a close call, you're almost a different species in that mode.
Yes.
And you. It seems like the good things in life come to you differently, the bad things in life come to you differently. And I don't know if it would be possible to sustain that kind of awareness, but those days are very interesting when that's happening.
That was it. Yeah, that was what was so good about it. You talk about the intense, sharp, and perception of
and I think
that
also
was close.
Yeah, and the courage,
I better get
because I'm kind of naturally a little bit of a kind of a get-along person. I don't like trouble, and I don't like to be rude. And in those days, I just didn't care. Not that I wanted to be rude, but the truth was closer, and it seemed much more idiotic to resist the truth that was right in your face. So you would see a problem and just you'd give your opinion, or you'd take an action. Whereas maybe before the things happened, you'd try to be a little more ceremonious, a little more polite. And it seemed that in almost every case, when I would be bold like that, I was actually a better person and kind of nicer, really. There was like that feeling that if this was your last day, you wouldn't be pussyfooting around quite as much, for better or worse, and you'd kind of go at the kernel of corn a little more directly.
I wonder if I can find it, or if I even typed it out here, but I was going to not do all of Obad for you, but there's a line in it about those regrets that you subject yourself to. Would you sing something while I look for it here? Oh, here's a note we can get to. I wonder, George, what you and I have in common. Have you ever been sued by Lillian Hellman?
No, not that I know. Not that I know.
Okay, forget that. Let's see.
You've got the Midwest upbringing.
Yeah.
That was good.
Making all thought impossible, but how and where and when I shall myself die. Arid interrogation. Yet the dread of dying and being dead flashes afresh to hold and horrify. The mind blanks at the glare. That isn't the passage I was thinking of, but he goes on to think of three things: love unexpressed, something else, and time torn off unused.
Beautiful.
Good line for the writer and well, anybody.
Yeah. I had when I was on a plane that had an issue, and there was a very short time where it was such an issue that all the help had vanished, and and there was an electrical fire up the middle. It did like that, and then black smoke started coming out of those deals. And what was interesting was, for some amount of time, thought disappeared. Nothing. And I think if you'd asked me my name, I couldn't have come up with it. Yeah. And then gradually some words came, which were no, 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 no. And then I became aware of this airplane seat in front of me, and the first coherent thought was, it's time to get out of this body, and that's what's going to do it.
That seat in your face.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's not going to be enjoyable at all. So then we were, I think it was about maybe 7 or 8 minutes before they told us what was happening. But at this time, the plane was dropping pretty fast. The black smoke was coming out, and people were really hysterical. Yeah. And only after about 6 or 7 minutes, there was a 14-year-old boy sitting next to me, and I had not even seen anything except the back of the seat. And he said very sweetly, "Sir, is this supposed to be happening?" And that kind of roused me a little bit. And I thought, okay,
that was a bright kid.
That was a bright kid, yeah. But then slowly, as time went by, I started to maybe think a little bit about what would be left behind. But even that was so terrifying that your mind couldn't really go there. So
I realized while you were talking, that's the thing I read somewhere. Where did I? For people
in the New York Times magazine.
It's in that Times.
Yeah.
By the way, I should add that, Woody Allen has a well-known obsession with death, and when his first book of New Yorker pieces came out, he wasn't aware until someone pointed out that 14 out of the 20 had to do with death in one way or another. So naturally, I did him the favor of giving him Philip Larkin's Obad, ran into him a week later, and I said, "I hope I didn't ruin your day." And he said, "Not my day." What's the line? You made me think when you talk about the child. I think it's in The Death of Ivan Ilyich, the one by Tolstoy with that title, where a man is dying and he says, "I can't be dying, I'm murdering it, but as a child I had a little red and white leather ball."
Yeah.
And at first that seems to be a non sequitur, and then you realize That's probably where the mind would go.
Yeah. It goes from broader to, it says I had a home, I had a mother, something, and then it ends in that little red ball.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. It's
beautiful. So the old bag Lillian Hellman didn't sue you either?
Not yet. There's still time. Yeah.
I didn't realize writers could get you in trouble the way I'm not only alluding but referring to the Mary McCarthy Lillian Hellman incident that happened on my show.
But I do want to ask you one question.
Yeah, it's your turn now.
Well, here's something that I have said a lot, and I don't know if it's true, but I thought that your show was so original and so strange in the way that anything could happen on the show. So, question: what kind of prep would a guest undergo before he or she came onto your show?
Well, I think it goes back to the tradition established for how to run that kind of show by Jack Parr, and it involved what were called talent coordinators, and later they lobbied and got themselves called segment producers, and they would usually call Peter Ustinov at the St. Regis and say, "You're on tonight. Jack would like to know a few things you'd like to talk about." And the notes would be usually maybe 4 little paragraphs numbered on 2 or 3 pages. He has a funny story about coming through customs. He would like to talk about the current prime minister. He wants to do his imitation. And those could be elaborate in 8 or 10 pages or 0, which is what happened to me by accident with Katharine Hepburn. When she came in to study the studio. No one ever did that. See where it was, where she could put her foot, how she could sit, and then said, humorously, I hoped at first, "Well, why don't we just do it now?" And
so you had at that point, you have her notes prepared, or?
I put some papers on the desk so it would look like the show would look, so she wouldn't be surprised by anything. But my only great idea, and you can find this on YouTube, I just learned, I said, she probably isn't going to do the show. She's still deciding. Let's tape her visit to the studio. She won't know. She's never done television. And we did. And it made a great opening for the show, including the moment where she said to a stagehand, "Let's move this fence," or whatever. I said, "Well, we'd have to unscrew the whole thing. Don't tell me what's wrong. Just fix it." Will you promise to watch that?
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen that one.
I think it's on YouTube as Katharine Hepburn rearranges the furniture on the Cavett show. But then, after doing it and waiting for her verdict, I had to tell her, I thought. And I thought, I'll either get, "Well, goodbye then, Mr. Cavett." And she said, "I'll send somebody to look at it." And a lady at ABC said, "We've set the room up." And a woman came up wearing slacks and sandals and a khaki shirt and a babushka that only showed this much of her face and a very familiar voice. Oh.
So she sat and talked for the full hour.
Hours.
So. But she didn't think it was being taped. She just was.
Well, no.
chatting.
Then the talk she knew would be taped. After she said, "Let's do it now."
Right.
Yeah, I didn't want to get the impression I fooled her for hours. Although that's kind of a better idea.
Yeah. And at some point, the audience started to drift in, right? And you just kept.
Yeah, it was so long because I had real shows to do that night, and she was supposed to come in 2 days later for the show. The band came in and stunned seeing who was sitting there, the musicians, and then some other people, and I think a few people called friends. So that by the end of them, they're all on that my DVD called Hollywood Greats. You can hear an audience that wasn't there at the beginning. Especially when I told her I'd been in The Merchant of Venice with her at Stratford. Really? I said, "I wasn't on stage with you, but I had a line." What was it? "Gentlemen, my master Antonio is at his house and desires to speak with you both." Is that the way you said it? Then she went, "I'm sorry." But boy, was she good. She was nervous.
Yeah.
Imagine, Katharine Hepburn at the beginning was nervous. Yeah. And that totally relaxed me. You'll find this when you do your talk show. Yeah. Because I thought, she needs me.
Yeah.
I need to help this pitiful little woman.
But do you have thoughts on because now the shows are they're more prep heavy, it seems like. They don't want a lot of accidents. They want kind of, do you feel that something was lost in that?
I think so, and
yeah.
I did a show recently, and I liked the guy, and I said to him, and he took it as a compliment, how do you read the entire show off teleprompter? I never heard of this. Introductions, want to get their movie name right and stuff. But he's mastered doing almost, he ad-libs, of course, you have to, because he doesn't know what's going to come up. But Jack learned his monologue. Johnny, as you could always tell by his eyes dropping to where the cue cards were glued along here, didn't. It didn't matter because he was a master at it. But Jack wrote it out in longhand, and that committed it to memory for him somehow. It was amazing. I never saw anybody do that before. Yeah. And when a great star does your line the first time, they can shoot you then, you're happy. No. And if it's Groucho Marx, twice.
Yeah. But it seemed like some of the spontaneity of your show would go into really interesting places, and you could really get the measure of a person. You could really feel the way that two or three great minds might work together. But it seems like now there's so much pre-shaping with the desired end that in a certain way the show resembles itself, repetitively. But in the long run, it feels like somehow the sense that I had as a kid of going, oh, this is how cultured people interact. This is the way a conversation sometimes goes. This is the way that someone bristles. This is the way that somebody blunders into something they didn't mean to say. That seems to have kind of receded a little bit.
I know. I don't know what the cause of that is. I mean, it's easy to put what's the cause of the brainless starlet. There's an old term who comes on and says, uses the word excited 5 times. She's excited about her movie and excited by her director and excited about her costume. And then this perpetual state of excitement making you wonder why her eyelids are at half-mast. They show a meaningless clip from the show, and she's off. Right. I just stopped doing that, but I love when Dave Letterman gets that because he's funny with it, and sometimes at the lady's expense, and well-deserved. Yeah. But you used a key word. Before I did the first show, Jack Parr called. I was still in awe of Jack right up through the end of working for him and after. And he said, "Hey, kid, when you do the show, don't do." Or my stutter's coming back. Jack stuttered. Don't do interviews. And I thought, well, what? Sing or read to the audience? He said, no. Here it comes again. No, that's interviews. That's what's your favorite this, and David Frost, and clipboards, and what's your favorite color, and let me ask you this. Make it a conversation. And what an insight, and it's the whole secret, and it's what Jack did. And you could feel it when you went out there prepared sometimes and a little stiff and a little afraid of the guest. And then James Mason, my first week, got so damned interesting that I forgot my notes, forgot I was on the air, and we talked until there was frantic signaling. You've got a commercial! Sometimes you'd think, when you have your show the first week, oh my God, the guest's lips have stopped moving. And I don't have any idea what he or she said. And I only found it too late to have a general question ready, something that applies to everybody.
Have your lips
stopped
stopped moving?
Shower,
That would be
something like
that'd be a good question. Have your lips stopped moving?
We're both alive up here. I made an X on a couple things here that I wanted to get to with you, and Oh, we'll see. Did we do death yet?
We did it.
Yeah.
So easy.
Somewhere, maybe in that piece, you said something in an original-ish way about that somehow.
Oh, I remember that one. I was really on that day.
It was right on page 2, I think, right near the bottom of page 2.
That's why I tend to say them.
No, the thing that you said in an uncliched way had to do with the fact that it's something we all have. It'll happen to all of us, except Dick Cheney, apparently.
Yeah.
Say something.
No, I don't know. I think that for a fiction writer, about a death, a story is pretty good. You know, there's nothing as interesting, and whether you're actually dying or trying to avert it, it turns the heat up in a room a little bit when there's death on the horizon.
Are there people who can actually put it out of mind utterly? I wonder.
Who can what?
Who can put it out of mind? And
I don't think you'd want to be that
for
person.
A big surprise.
Yeah, a big surprise. I think put it in mind is probably better.
Yeah, let me see what I put my X on here in the remaining hour that we have. Let's see, there's writings, the earliest writings, times, and that's this one. There's a page here with a bunch of X's. Just talk to each other for a minute. Well, this is kind of funny. You have to sign a release form. We both did. They sent me mine. My assistant said, print it and bring it in. And I did. Something might be wrong with me or my printer, but here it is.
You're going to need a very small pen.
Can you read that?
Yeah, I wouldn't sign it. I wouldn't. No. That's how they get you.
Even if I sign it, how will they know? It's that part. I made a big note here about your becoming a person thanks to me, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I did it to anybody else.
I bet you did.
Writers who can't talk. There's another problem with some writer guests I found. Some of them had unusual voices. Now, you know the writers of that time, although you were too young to be hobnobbing with Cheever and Updike and Saul Bellow and all those folks. I had one writer who would come on, and I had to brace myself. I would introduce him, and it would sound something like So you've been photographed a lot lately with Lee Radziwill. Why is that?
Yeah, she's very interesting and fun. And very beautiful and very nice talking. That's right.
Yeah. And what I had to brace myself for was the audience always did that when poor Truman began speaking. Anyone know which Truman I mean?
I actually remember seeing him on your show, and I didn't know who he was, and I thought, that's amazing talking. How does he do that? Where did he learn that? I want to talk like that. And there was actually, in our grade school, there was a little epidemic of people who didn't know who he was, but they'd seen the show, and we would imitate him. Him and Nixon were the big imitations. We didn't know he was a writer. We just thought he was a guy from New York. That's all we knew.
Typical New Yorker.
Yeah.
When you bogus as other people were in many ways, but he was entertaining to talk to. He always had a story that he claimed happened to him, and sometimes you knew it was from Colette or something. But he was a lot of fun.
In those days, were writers were they reticent to come on TV? Was there ever someone who said, I'm a writer, I wouldn't dream of going on TV, or were they happy to do it?
If Chris Porterfield's in the audience, maybe he'll yell out one or two. I think E.B. White wrote a lovely note that I'm afraid I've lost, as I have many things, saying he appreciated the invitation, but I think maybe it's a little late for me to start a new medium, to learn a new medium. And Saul Bellow was there, and just about, never Philip Roth, I'm sorry to say.
Was he invited? Or
I think he was, yeah.
Yeah.
That is one way to get a guest. And what's funny is when you learn that somebody wanted to come on the show. does anyone know the name Fred Astaire? He admitted that he had hoped he could come on, and nobody had asked him for quite a while, and then he did. Anyone remember? I loved Fred Astaire, and he did 2 90-minute shows with him, but I'd take your time with this. But
No.
Paul Lynde, how hilarious Paul Lynde was.
Oh, yeah.
He had a special writer. He himself was not witty, so he could never come on my show because he said, they'll think I'm as funny. But here's a writer made him that way. What was the host's name on that show? Peter something.
Peter Marshall.
Peter Marshall, yeah. Mr. Astaire had retired, and so it went like this. This gentleman has said he will never do this thing again. This gentleman's name is Fred Astaire, and he will never do this thing again. Paul Lynde. Order hair by mail. Oh. I can see someone reviewing us tomorrow saying,
he did a great Paul Lynde.
well, yeah, it's easy for me.
But Astaire, when in the DVD, there's some thought that he had never used the stand-up microphone before or something. He said he went to do that wonderful medley, and he seemed kind of.
Yeah, he did a 20-minute medley of Gershwin, and the next time he came on, he did a 20-minute medley of Cole Porter.
But that was somebody who.
Did he say he'd never used a hand
I
mic?
thought he said, or maybe it was an overhead mic, but he was sort of unfamiliar with the technology.
Oh, I don't have to check that. I should watch some of my shows.
You should, because that's actually an amazing moment, because he as an interview, he didn't really want to say much. You say, how did you get interested in dancing? And he says, well, I went to a dance class, and it's very interesting.
He was not the easiest person to talk to, and yet he loved being on, and he broke his rule and danced, and my hair stood up, and so did the audiences.
Yeah, as soon as he did that, he came alive.
Yeah, he really. But you're right. I found an old answering machine tape, and it was, Dick, this is Fred. I think that you get to the place, and they've sent me these notes, and I just, and Ginger would always, well, anyway, they're just not my bag. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Would you be surprised to learn that his only stipulation in the guest notes was that we not talk about his origins?
Really?
In Omaha, yeah. Who would be the last person to come from Omaha in the world?
Yeah. He was ashamed of him, or he just didn't
Frederick Austerlitz, the Austerlitz Brewery, and Jewish. Partially. A grandfather or great-grandfather. But isn't that wonderful? All those anti-Semitic country clubs he belonged to in California.
Yeah, wow.
With his friend, the Duke of Windsor, and other wretches. Anyway. Did you know Chris Hitchens at all?
I saw him at a couple of events, but I never met him. Wonderful writer.
Do you find writers more fun to hang out with than other people?
No.
Is there
no,
talk?
No. I think writers are more fun to email with than other people.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I mean, I always felt like, when you're writing, you have time to go back and refine yourself and be more truthful, be funnier, be more direct. Whatever personality defects you have, you can look at them and go, yep, there you are again, old friend, and work with it. And then, so in the end, the thing that comes out is more interesting and smarter and more accessible and funnier. So I think when I first was really interested in writing, it was this sense that I didn't have enough. I liked the world, I loved people, and I wanted to be in there somewhere. But when I would show up in person, I just felt like, oh, I'm so disappointing to myself. I wanted to be more. And then when I sat down to write something, the thing that got produced eventually had more of me in it than I did. So I felt like, well, you could send that ahead of yourself, and then show up, not say much, not let anybody know. But
have you found it true, as I did the hard way, that you invite a writer on and he can't talk too good?
Well, I can't. I mean, I'm from the south side of Chicago, and my one of the things I do in all my books is make these inarticulate characters, but you know, it's pretty easy. You just kind of, you know, yeah. So I mean, my working theory has been that you, whatever mode of discourse you can occupy enthusiastically, you should do so. And then trusting that if you work with it and exaggerate that mode, it becomes poetic. So in Chicago, a lot of the guys, the older guys in the neighborhood were not particularly articulate in a traditional way. And they would say, if they wanted to express affection for you, they might say, you jack off, you fucking, you know what I'm, you fuck, but we knew the language, and he loves me.
And you say, may I quote?
Yeah. But so one of the, I mean, as a kind of a writer from that background, for a long time I just tried to be Nabokov and failed. I tried to be Hemingway and failed. And then for me, a big turning point was when I went, maybe if I just take that mode and all the other strange American street modes that I know, let them into the table and just sort of put some adrenaline in them, kind of get them to step up and be dictional systems, then that might be poetry too. And in fact, that's kind of what I've been doing. So when I talk, I always feel inarticulate, but I think, well, if I could write it, I could refine it. And maybe I could even make it less articulate, but more meaningful.
In an interesting way.
Yeah.
Does it embarrass you to talk about your style? Because they always write about his style is this and that, and obviously obsessed with words, they say to you, and that kind of thing. But should a writer think about a style?
I think so, all the time.
Yeah,
I do. But sometimes, what I found is the style is actually you regarded with generosity. So in other words, all of your natural attributes and tendencies and tics, even your habits. As a young writer, you're trying to put up a screen and say, you have to stay out. Only Old English is spoken here. And then at some point, style means let the fence down, let all those idiots in, let them gather around, and then see what they really want to say. So for me, for example, when we were younger, I worked for engineering companies, and I have a degree in engineering. So technical language is really natural to me. And so for many years, I thought, well, that's too bad because that isn't literature. But then if you say, well, maybe it is, and you start letting it in, your style becomes that which is readily available to you. So style, maybe I tell my students, sometimes style is the voice that you can do very easily, your mother's voice or your father's voice or your sibling's voice. Or it might even be your voice, the part of it that you're secretly ashamed of might actually be the key to your originality. You have this, I think when writers are young, we have this idea that, you fall in love with Hemingway, and there's Hemingway Mountain, and it's so beautiful. There's clouds at the top and a bunch of manly men standing around. And so you think, I'll do that. And you strike up the hill, and it's hard work, but you're going to be Hem someday, or you'll be in the Hem lineage. You'll be the recipient of the Hemingway Prize. And then you get up there, and you get close to the top, you see that all you're ever going to be is Hemingway light, or you're being an imitator. Yeah. So then you think, oh, that's ridiculous, and you come down, and it's discouraging. And then you look over, and thank goodness, Kerouac Mountain is nearby, and you go up there. So I think you do a lot of that, and finally for me, after we'd had our daughters, and I was working at an engineering company, I took one more shot at James Joyce Mountain, which was actually this wedding novel that I tried, and I just thought, I can't do it anymore. So luckily, we had here's a sentence you won't often hear. Luckily, we had a conference call scheduled, and. So I was taking notes in the conference call and got really bored and started writing these little poems, these kind of Dr. Seussian sort of rhyming, kind of nasty, kind of funny things. And every time I'd finish, I'd flip it over so they couldn't see it, and I'd make an illustration and flip that over. So this wasn't too long after that Mexican novel fiasco. And I brought it home and sort of threw it on the table. And my wife read this. And I heard for the first time in about 7 years of writing really sincere laughter. Pleasure. That's what I should. So at that point, I started being funny. I started allowing myself to be funny, to be a little bit working class in the thing. So I had a great week and wrote this story that was later published. And but that was a little bit like looking over and you get Saunders' molehill, just a little pile of crap with my name on it. Because the story wasn't anything like I wanted my stories to be. They weren't like Carver. They weren't like Hemingway. They was just that, And it felt original, but it felt a little sad too to have to come down off all these high peaks and go down there. But it was better to be there by myself than to be with the other.
Is there a writer in the past that you fantasize having met?
Well, Hemingway, I'd still like to meet that guy. Yeah, for sure. Actually, what I'd love to meet is the Nikolai Gogol, the Russian writer, because apparently he was a completely dysfunctional guy. Yeah, he taught university, and he was fired for falling asleep during his own lecture. Which, that's a. And he apparently had a huge beak nose.
Really?
And one of his accomplishments, he could actually touch the top of his nose with his tongue. He come over the top.
Can't everybody?
Yeah. And then he apparently also his mother used to claim that he had invented the locomotive, and he apparently didn't contradict her. So yeah. But he's a guy who took this incredible kind of crazy provincial background, and he came to St. Petersburg and kind of saw that he couldn't do Pushkin, so he started being himself. And the books are unbelievably brilliant and insightful, but apparently as a person he was
wonderful
a
to
train
read. But
wreck.
wouldn't you be dysfunctional if your name was Gogol?
It would, yeah, if you had that nose
Is
thing
it
going
possibly Gogol, so it has a little more something to it?
And the thing about him, that he had a phobia about anything small and sort of wormish. And also he had an obsession with his nose. So when he was dying, the doctor prescribed leeches on his nose. So that was his last.
Wow.
Is that a downer? Is it all?
Boy, I won't eat again for weeks. Well, here's something you've been dreading. Who's your favorite blogger for the New York Times Online? Surely you can think of the name.
I think, well, it's you. It's always been you. Is that fun to do?
I still run into people who say, I look on every goddamn page of the paper, I never find your column. And I would say, we live in an age when there's something called online. Here's a writer cringe-making story. By the way, was it Kingsley Amis who referred to Mary McCarthy as a real cock crinkler?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
You can admit it. I just thought I'd throw that in for the young people. In one of her essays, talking about the place she taught that she hated and wrote a funny novel about, one of her actual students said, Miss McCarthy, I have to leave now for whatever our meeting was. I have to go meet Professor James because we're working on my short story and he's going to help me put in the symbols. Does that go right to your... I love to make writers retch telling that story.
Speaking of long words with the word cock in them, I got an email from somebody a few years ago who said, I saw something you did online and it was disgusting. You're terrible. He said, if you're saying what I think you were saying, I haven't read the piece, but if you're saying what I think you're saying, you're... he said, and then he said, I find that completely cocksuck-worthian.
No kidding. Would you repeat that for those who missed it?
I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know.
Don't look at me. I can't arbitrate that. I wonder if they're getting the hook in the wings to get us off of here, because I just want to see if there's any one thing that would delight everyone so greatly. Oh, a writer's story. You got to let me tell this.
I will.
Updike and Cheever, I referred to that. And often I had two writers, Mailer and Vidal, and the great Janet Flanner. And this night I had two authors, W.H. Auden. W.H. Auden and Chad Everett. I forgot what series Chad was on.
He was on the Marcus Welby, I think.
Was he?
He was on the doctor show, yeah.
He was a nice
Medical
guy.
Center, yeah.
Yes, I believe that's it. He was a nice guy. He had what the great S.J. Perelman once said about the heads of studios, a forehead by dint of electrolysis. 2, 3, 4. And I just think that's such a great line. Anyway, but he's about that much more. But he was a sweet guy. He's dead now. And I've constantly been told you can't make jokes or say anything bad about the dead. And I say, Goebbels, Hitler, can I say something bad about it? Anyway, I will just deliver for you a quote that you will treasure from Chad Everett to W.H. Auden. Suppose you were assigned to write a line. Well, I won't.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
He turned. I see you sweating. He turned to Mr. Auden, who later that night said, "I will never appear on television again." Trust me. And said, "Will you be Auden?"
I will.
He was right here. Do you work from life or what? Oh, why that isn't in Bartlett's quotations, I have no idea.
Did he have an answer? Did Auden have an answer?
I don't remember. I think Auden just slipped down farther there, or into his shirt collar or something. Not quite as good was because Chad had had 2 poems printed in Pageant magazine, so he saw them as equals.
They were peers.
And, yeah. That's it. In fact, Chad said to me at one point, "You don't understand, we poets."
Oh, he did. He did.
Am I being cruel? Gee, this has really been I've had a good time here. Is anyone else? I can't come up with anything as good. Do you work from life or what? There ought to be a special award for a writer who could write that. You know, it's funny, we talked earlier about going back and rewording things, and one of the first things I learned slowly, unfortunately, as a gag writer, what Woody Allen began as when he was 17, and then for Sid Caesar, not gags, but that in a joke writing, topical lines, your first wording is always the right one. And I'm not sure I can explain why that is, but you will write a gag, let's say, and the punchline is, "That was no lady, that was my wife." And that's a perfectly worded punchline, and then you'll think, well, maybe it should be, "That was no lady, that was the woman I'm married to." Which kills it, of course. Or, "That was no real lady." And then you realize there's a guy on the staff who came on for 13 weeks. Let's say his name was Dave Jones. And he established the phrase Dave Jonesing a line. Mm-hmm. He asked me for help, and I would say, "How did you first write this line? Go back to that." It hits you right. Something in there writes it correctly for you.
That Russian writer Isaac Babel.
Invariably.
Isaac Babel said he said you turn something like you turn the wheel slowly, and at the exact moment you pull the lever, and that's the line. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a good image for it. Yeah. And yet, there is such a thing as rewriting, but I don't think in that field. Once I took a line to Groucho, and he substituted. He was on Tonight Show for 2 weeks before Johnny came on. And I read I said, "That's a very good line, but it needs a side knee."
Exciting.
I said, "I'm sorry?" "It needs a side knee." Groucho's pronunciation of "certainly" from upside New York.
I need a side knee.
It should be, instead of "you could have fooled me," it should have been, "well, your side knee could have fooled me." And that made the line work.
Well, I read that they used to take they had vaudeville, so they would do lines with slight variations every night, and at one point they'd say, this is the wording that really nails it, and they'd use that in the future. Kind of rewriting on the fly, I guess.
Well, another thing he talked about was the fact that Thalberg had them do their next movie on the stage up and down the West Coast, like the cabin scene and find where the laughs were. To hold. This explains why I was mystified when I went to a Marx Brothers movie one rainy afternoon, having roared at it the night before with a full crowd, and their performance was off. They held too long because they knew for an audience that was the right time to say the line. I never heard of any other example of that in movie making. All right. So what's at your bedside? What's on your coffee table now to read when you're not working and slaving?
I've been reading this guy, Horatio Moya. He's a Salvadoran writer who's living in Pittsburgh now, I think. And he writes these crazy 120, 130-page novels that are just like, they're like slapstick.
Say his name again?
Horatio Moya, M-O-Y-A.
Moya.
Yeah. I think he's got 6 or 7 books, but I've been trying to kind of think how I might go from a short story to a longer form. And these are really good examples because they're fast and they don't worry much about theme or meaning, but they're just like rapid fire kind of jokes and action and violence and really like a lot of energy in them. So reading that.
Did Ambrose Bierce mean anything
to
you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Incident at Owl Creek Bridge, right? Yeah. He's got some amazing Civil War reporting too, because he was at all the major battles and scary stuff. Yeah.
And they never found a trace of him, did they?
Yeah. No.
How many of us can say that? Does anyone have one great question from the audience to close with? And it cannot be who's been your most interesting guest. And for him, it cannot be
who's been his most
tell
interesting
how you
guest.
like Dix more. What was yours?
Who's been your most interesting guest?
Oh, yeah. Did I see a lady attempting to speak? Well, the hell with you. Okay. Gosh, you're supposed to have been listening all this time. I'm looking around for a signal that we have worn out our welcome. Anyone?
Stay forever, yeah.
Stay forever, okay. Okay, you asked for it. And, say again? Oh, okay. Well, should we ask them some questions?
Yeah. There's a question here.
Oh, yeah, I can't see it. Oh, there, yeah.
I really, the best answer is this Flannery O'Connor thing. She said, you can choose what you write, but you can't choose what you make live. So for me, whenever if you give me 10 pages and ask me to cut it to 6, I get really happy about that. But if you gave me 6 and told me to make 10, I would sort of get nervous. So I think it might be something like the, in sports where there's fast twitch and slow twitch muscles. And I think for me, I know how to cut. I know how to make things quick, short, and I think sometimes my stories are like those little toys. You sort of wind them up, put them on the ground, and they go under the couch, and you're happy, But as soon as I start thinking about, the backstory or something, I just get kind of depressed. So I think it's probably just inclination, I think.
Does it annoy a high-quality writer like yourself? I won't look you in the eye because you might blush. When people without much talent have great success in writing?
I don't think that ever happens, Dick.
All right, what about Rod McEwen? Oh, God, I just remembered. He was a nice guy, too, so I'm going to say something awful. He came on the show at the peak of his success. And I introduced him as America's most understood poet. Was that bad? Oh, God, it's coming back. Not only that, I said, as sure as June doth rhyme with moon, here in the flesh is Rod McEwen.
Oh.
There's a side of me you might not have ever seen.
Yeah. I'm expanding my definition of how to be a person.
Yeah. He's going to take it back. I know. No. Where do you describe a boy as having unfortunate Prince Valiant bangs?
That's in the title story of this new book, this 10th of December.
So it is.
Yeah.
So it is.
Yeah. He was based on a real life model of this.
He brought to mind a kid we used to pick on in school.
Yeah, that was him. That was
See, I could have gotten there first.
Yeah.
You were about to sign some books, I do believe?
Sure.
How long have we been on, just for fun? How many people have... Oh, did someone have an urgent hand up? Or is that a camera or a pistol?
Yeah, pistol. Over here.
Someone respectable?
Yeah, there's...
Yeah, could we have some impersonal questions?
Here's somebody right there on the right. Really, honestly, no, because I think that the way I think about style is that the sentence is only good in the matrix. That, in other words, a sentence is in a kind of a linear temporal thing that's going on, and your feet are going down as you read, and you need just that sentence. So I don't really have any that I like. In fact, most of them I kind of hate at this point. I kind of, you do it and you feel okay about it, and then the hope is that the next thing would be better. So nothing really comes to mind. It's a boring answer, but I can't.
How good is your memory of what you've read that you can quote a line?
Terrible. When I was younger, it was a little better.
It's a gift that is distributed in various ways.
I think so, yeah.
I think I may have it. My friend Porterfield is getting an awful lot of publicity here tonight. Always expresses wonder that I think all the Shakespeare soliloquies. And I never memorized them.
You didn't?
And yet I don't have a photographic memory, I have an auditory memory. And if I was in a play with someone who did Richard II, I hear him doing it, and that prompts me. But once in a while, with Mark Twain, would you rather I said Samuel Clemens?
No.
There's a line, I read it, and I know that I've got it. This one, somebody should do a book of all of Mark Twain's writings of his hatred of the French. Maybe I will. And this particular line in the middle of an essay says, she's describing a shine on something. He said, "It shone with that rare combination of lust and envy that burns in a Frenchman's eye when it falls upon another man's centime." Centime, anybody? Now, you wouldn't want to say another man's coin, would you?
No,
because that killed
centime.
Isn't that a withering line? Want to hear it again? What do we do? I've run out of my Twain lines.
Well, I just want to really thank you for doing this. It was so much fun. And,
well, I hope I
childhood
haven't
dream realized.
destroyed your
Not a
image.
bit. No. It's been wonderful.
This has been really good for me, too. Can we get up and get off?
I think we should, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me just one thing.
Thank you.
One little lagniappe. At a college once, a nice lady said, "Could you close with a favorite quote of some writer that will be inspiration for the boys and girls?" Still using that phrase. And I said, yes. And it ended. And I said, here's something that's meant a lot to me, and you too should. It's by either Gore Vidal or La Rochefoucauld or me, I'm not sure. But the line is, "Success is not enough. One's friends must fail."